Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacey Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths. These badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacey's obsession. This podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.
Welcome to Parsing the Truth, One Bite at a Time. I'm Stacey Eldridge, and with me, as always, is Becky Passmore. And this podcast focuses on digital evidence, forensic examinations, and the real stories about what happens behind the keyboard and inside the courtroom. Let's dig into tonight's episode. Becky, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, tonight we are going back to 2005. The case is People of California versus Michael Joseph Jackson. The charges stem from allegations made by Gavin Arvizo, a 13-year-old boy, concerning events that allegedly took place in 2003 to 2004 at Jackson's Neverland Ranch. Jackson was indicted on 10 counts. 4 counts of molesting a minor, 4 counts of administering an intoxicating agent to a minor, 1 count of attempted child molestation, and 1 count of conspiracy to hold the Arvizo family captive and extort them. Gavin and his brother testified that Jackson had given them alcohol, shown them pornography, masturbated before them, and made sexual advances towards them.
So yes, this is the Michael Jackson. I'm sure you guys clued in once you heard Neverland Ranch, right? Cases related to Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson just keeps coming up in the news. I think some of this is, bolstered by the fact that the recent release of his movie, or the movie Michael, about Michael Jackson's life through the release of his album Bad, was featured. I think that brings up a lot of memories for a lot of people, and it does for me. I mean, I don't know, Becky, do you remember the first time you saw the music video for Thriller?
Oh, yeah. And I was a Michael Jackson fan growing up, singing the songs, dancing to the dances, and Thriller was my favorite. Absolutely.
Yeah. Were you a moonwalker? Could you moonwalk?
Couldn't moonwalk. It's not because I didn't try, and it wasn't because I didn't practice. I just was not a moonwalker. Yeah.
Right. Well, I remember I saw the Michael Jackson Thriller video when I was at the roller skating rink for an elementary school roller skating party. So that's how old we are.
I know. And at first I remember Thriller being a very scary,
right?
The dance and the zombie looking people. I remember that as a child, I wasn't a child, in my 20s thinking, oh, this is kind of like a scary movie. So, and I'm not a scary movie watcher. So yeah, very interesting.
But, everything being brought up again, and there's ever since the trial, when it ended and today, different lawsuits get brought forth, the old stuff keeps coming back in the news. But after seeing the movie, it got me thinking about the case. Now, when it was going on live in 2005, I was in CART, and so was Becky. I initially didn't pay much attention to the trial, but I was in the LA field office when Michael Jackson died in 2009. And so his funeral, the public funeral, was in the Staples Arena, whatever it was, in downtown LA. But I'm telling you, it had to have been a solid month before you could walk anywhere without hearing Michael Jackson music playing.
Wow.
And undoubtedly, with all of that attention coming up, people in the office, they got to talking again about Michael Jackson and his trial and everything that went down with it. So, I thought, let's talk about this on the podcast too and see what we can figure out about the facts of the digital evidence in this case.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. How did it start, Becky?
So on November the 18th, 2003, Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office executed search warrant at Michael Jackson's home. the Neverland Ranch. It's reported that around 70 officers participated in the search.
Then on November 19th, 2003, so the next day, a rummy warrant was issued for Michael Jackson's arrest.
And the arraignment of Michael Jackson was on January the 6th, 2004.
And then just a short time later, on January 15th, the CART service request was entered at the FBI, and it was entered under the case number 62D-LA-236081. And this case number, every different type of case has a different numbering system at the beginning of it. And this one, 62D, is a assistance to law enforcement case number. The CART service request is what the case agent fills out to have someone from CART work on digital evidence. Now, if you look at the request, it says that the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department has requested assistance in processing the computers and related media related to the Michael Jackson case. And the SBSD, as they're commonly referred to, Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department, you might also see it as SBPD or SPSO as you're looking through different acronyms of different stuff. But basically just think Santa Barbara. They are the ones who initially executed the search warrant and ran the case. The FBI was just adding technical expertise. Now, on the request, it said that they had requested examiners with some words that were redacted backgrounds. And it seems that all the examinations were wrapped up by April 4th, 2004. So like within under 3 months, they got this all done.
It's interesting. I wonder what kind of background they had to have. And I wonder if that was maybe experience with CSAM or child exploitation, child sexual exploitation material, or was it a MAX certification, like someone had to have been able to analyze Apple devices like Emacs and PowerBooks.
Yeah, I don't know. It would have been interesting to see what those words are. Now, you can actually review everything that's been released in the Michael Jackson case that the FBI had. You can visit it. It was done, they have like a FOIA vault. And so you can visit vault.fbi.gov/Michael Jackson. And the digital evidence related to this case in 2005 when it went to trial is released in part 2 of all the different things they have released out there.
And we can link that in our show notes as well. So let's start to look at the list of evidence, and this seems to have been released in full. It comes from the 1A envelope on page 4. There is a column in the middle that was redacted. So Stacey, do you remember what a 1A envelope was?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was just like it kind of says it's a 1A envelope because we have different numbering systems.
Right.
And as far as I know, the 1A stuff just went into a filing cabinet in the field office.
Yep. And in the 1A envelope stored different components of documents for the case. So like you said, this was a 62D case. This was assistance to law enforcement. So think if a detective and an FBI agent or someone that was representing law enforcement and FBI agent, they went out and interviewed people, or they went out and took some notes on something. All that is stored in what we call the 1A envelopes. There's a lot of different things that would be stored in the 1A envelope. Then they're attached to the case. And so that is where all of that original, I would say, documentation would be stored for the case.
Yeah, because we were still dealing with a lot of paper stuff. So think if it was like a piece of paper. I've seen like, and even in this case, like newspaper clippings are put into the 1A envelopes, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you can look it up in the computer system and they would kind of have like a description of it. And then you would say, oh, like this is in a 1A envelope. And then you would know to go to the filing cabinet and look there.
Yeah, it was just a way for them to store, evidence that could be used in court. So now we're talking like there is a column in the middle of this 1A envelope, or this 1A, on page 4 within this 1A envelope that's been redacted.
Yeah, we were trying to guess what it was. We're like, was it the name of the person who did it? That was your idea, Becky. I'm like,
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But as the CART examiner, the reason we know all this stuff is because they were tracking it all. So you get the cart service request that comes in and says, we would like you to do X. Then you would also have to log everything that you worked on. And so in cart, we would use queue numbers for the question items. So that would be like the laptops and hard drives coming in. And then we use DE numbers for the derivative evidence. And so derivative evidence is the stuff that you create from the queue numbers. And so that would be stuff like forensic images, digital reports. If you just exported a set number of files, those could be in any of the DE that was created. And typically, I mean, if we're dealing with reports at this point in time, it's probably on DVDs and CDs. And some of the forensic images are going on to hard drives or tapes.
Yeah. And so we'll link this in our show notes as well. But as Stacey was talking about, Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office, SBSO, item number was an item number that was associated with this evidence that was collected. And so then that's in the first column. And then in the second column is that Q number, that FBI questionable item or questioned item. And then the next column was this DE or derivative evidence number, the size of the data, if known, and what type. And then any comments in the last column, it was the middle column that was redacted. And so looking at this from the standpoint of a chain of custody or who touched it, that's where I came up with the idea that likely someone's name, and they redact names so that, for the purpose of protecting their employees. But in this 1A envelope, they named it, so there was a SBSO MX 200-05 and the number QLA1. So questionable item, Los Angeles, and item number 1. Then you had in that item number was listed as item 908, and it became QLA 1_1. And
not to be confused with derivative evidence, it's kind of like something that was contained within it.
Correct. And then you had the derivative LA1. And so it tells what size that is, and it was 1 gig. And interesting, this was a 4PB 1400C laptop from bedroom office. 1 gig. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's just a 1 gig hard drive. And I don't know why I was looking at this. I don't know on why some of them they have like a 4 and a 2. I don't know if it had a number 4 on it, but I think the PB is for PowerBook.
Okay, so the PowerBook.
So a PB 1400C laptop. That's 1 gig. I mean, that one's older, and we'll find out more about how old it is.
Yeah.
So
on this document, you can go look at it in our show notes. It just talks about what items were collected. And in the comments, it's the Apple PowerBook G4 laptop. It tells it's where its location. And in these situations, it's from the office. And then an item number 329 was an Apple laptop with a projector from suitcase, from stairwell closet. So it's given a location of where these things are found. An Apple eMac from the master den floor area, an iMac from MJJ office desk, likely Michael Jackson's office desk, 2 PowerBook G4s from Michael Jackson's bedroom, an Apple PowerBook G4 laptop from upstairs video library, bathroom, an Apple. There was a lot of Apple laptops here.
Yeah. All this stuff that went to the FBI was Apple, as far as I can tell.
And so going back to have experience with, in my opinion, at this point, it would be somebody that understood these Apple devices, because back in 2004, 2005, 2006 timeframe, there weren't a whole lot of card examiners that had done and had gone through any type of Mac experience. But there was 3 laptops from locked closet in master bedroom, 1 PowerBook G3 laptop from Michael Jackson's bedroom. So the size, the markings, the derivative, the questionable items, all that's on this sheet, and you can go check it out in our show notes.
Yeah, and they've got a little bit of everything. You got the PowerBooks, you got an eMac. Do you remember what the eMac is? It was like the first it had the cool colors. It had the CRT screen, and it was like the all-in-one thing.
All-in-one, yeah. Yeah,
and you
because
get like green
that
or purple.
yeah, and then they moved to iMac, which was all in one, and I actually have an old one upstairs in my bedroom.
And I think the IMAX, that's when they switched to the little CD screens, and so it was a square. The other one was CRT, so it was more of like a big. I look like an old tube TV, right? If you know what those look like, but
Yeah.
it was innovative. You could pick your colors. It was very exciting to have that sort of choice with all of that evidence. But yeah, so this is as they recorded it from that FOIA request that we can see. But so key takeaway: lots of Mac laptops from Michael Jackson's residence. And let's see here. Okay, I was going to comment that I thought that they divided this a little differently than I would have done it. And I think the main story is just be consistent in the way that you do it all the time.
Right.
Because I think, like, if you look at the list, it looks like they gave the Q number to the container, like the box, and then each item they took out of it, they subdivided it with the underscore. So that's why you have like, it looks like 3 different laptops coming from QLA1.
It's really the devices. Maybe it's a SD card. I don't know how these were set up, but whatever was internally associated with that laptop or connected to that laptop, right? You could have some connections made through USB ports or whatever the case may be back in 2005. I don't know what those would be on a Mac, but yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would definitely, you would always have an _1 because that's going to be, well, generally you should, right? If it's a functioning laptop or computer, you would have the hard drive in it. If you found an SD card in it, then that would be like _2. But it looks like they just divided the laptops out of the container. And so you have like QLA1 _1 and _2 and _3 and _4. And those appear to be all different devices. So, but they're consistent in the way they've done it. But the whole point of that is just to have some sort of unique tracking item to refer to the different items as well. But I think the key takeaway from that whole list is if you look at it, there's 16 different computers and laptops that were given to CART headquarters of the FBI to examine. There wasn't any CDs that were seized that were provided to them, no DVDs that were provided to them. Nothing looks to be a Windows laptop or computer provided on there. So, we don't know if none of that stuff was seized. Did he really only just have like computers and laptops at his house? Or because that is evidence that most examiners can handle. Is that something that Santa Barbara kept and did the examinations of themselves? I don't know. It never came up. It never came up in the trial. So we don't know what else there was.
Yeah. And then what about the derivative evidence? There's a significant amount of derivative evidence that's created. In fact, the number goes all the way up to 27. So we know there's 27 different pieces of derivative evidence that were created from these evidence items.
Yeah. And so we can see that DELA 1 through 7 appears to contain the forensic images of QLA 1 through 4. And it's very typical to just put as many forensic images onto whatever media you have as possible. And then after that, it starts with the derivative evidence at number 10, DEL at 10, and then it goes all the way through 27. And with the exception of DELA 12, it all says CD summary results. And so those CD summary results are typically what we would call your CART report, your CART digital report. It could be just independent files that you've extracted. It's important to note that DELA 12 has 4 DVDs with copies of graphic files. Now, according to this, that comes from QLA 1_2. So we've got 4 DVDs worth of graphic files coming from one device.
Yes. Yep.
But we don't know what numbers 8 through 9 are. They're missing from the list. They're missing from the written report. Did not figure out what it was.
Okay. So then when we look at that DELA 12, it contains derivative evidence that you were just talking about, the QLA 1_2. So that now is going to point to, in our original document above, or that you'll see in the show notes, which was a 30 gig power book seized from the office, and it included 4 DVDs with the copies of the graphic files, just like you mentioned.
So we'll have to look at the cart examiner's written report to see if there's any additional details we can obtain regarding any of this derivative evidence. Because if they find possible evidence creating, regarding the case, they will create derivative evidence. That's our job. We find, possible evidence, and then we produce it so the case agent can look at it.
Correct. So in 2004, which is when I got into CART,
Mm-hmm.
CART was handwriting notes. And then when you were done, you would print the service request and any logs that you produced. And then you would write the case number, page number, and your initials on every single page. Then you'd put that into a 1A envelope, which was eventually put into the filing cabinet on the squad that this case would be stored at. And it was given to, at the time, they called them rotors. So the squad's rotor then would serialize it. And the rotor was basically that admin assistant, and serializing meant you could go look up that information and retrieve it.
And in the FOIA request that they've produced, you can see all of the 1A envelopes themselves. They've scanned them in. You can see them all and see what they said, unless they redacted something.
Right. And then they provided portions of the case notes. And so we want to be clear here. It's not all of the case notes in their entirety. It's just portions of those notes.
Yeah, and I read somewhere that it was actually probably only about 50% of all of the pages that the FBI had related to Michael Jackson. So half of it, we don't know what it says. And I know a bulk of it is case notes, as you will all find out as we go through some of this stuff. But let's go ahead and review the different 1A envelopes and what they had in them.
On page 3 of the PDF, there are 2 sets of case notes from 3/2 to 11 of 2004, and then 3/20 to 29 of 2004, and that's 15 and 13 pages, and all those came from CART headquarters.
And then on page 4 is another 1A from CART headquarters, and it contains the list of specimen that we reviewed earlier.
And page 7 is going to contain the case notes from a Cleveland division CART team with 11 pages of notes.
So it's interesting that it went to Cleveland, and we were trying to figure out who some of these examiners might have been, and I was talking to a few different people, and then he talked to a few different people, and he said he thought, like, in 2004 there were probably only like maybe 16 people in the FBI certified to do math. So you can see why it ended up going out to Cleveland. And I mean, they got this done pretty fast, really. So no backlog on this one.
Right.
This episode is powered by Ace Forensics. Ace Forensics has been building computer systems since 1983, and they deliver high-performance workstations, laptops, and servers built for today's digital forensic tools. They offer unmatched value and the industry's only 5-year warranty. If you're tired of waiting on slow machines, head over to aceforensics.com for a competitive quote today and have Ace Forensics build the systems you deserve. And now, back to our episode.
Let's see. Up next is page 8. Now, these are the notes from a detective from SBSD. That's what it says on the envelope. And it states it's a review of string search and keyword hits. And it's 18 pages long. And some of these case notes have actually been included in the FOIA return for viewing.
Wow. And page 24 is case notes and exams, which is 7 pages from CART headquarters.
Page 25 is a FedEx receipt for DELA 12 from CART headquarters.
And then page 28 is from CART headquarters and contains 9 pages of case notes from exams between February the 2nd, 2004 and March the 5th, 2004. 11 pages of case notes from exams between March the 22nd, 2004 and April the 1st of 2004.
And page 29 of the PDF, that 1A states that there's 51 pages of case notes combined, sorted by specimen and number for the CART examiners LL, BAG, QEC, and JVK.
Which
And
Stacy and
then,
I tried to figure out who all these initials belonged to for these card examiners back at that time. And unfortunately, I couldn't
well,
come up with any. I
yeah,
think
well,
you
and I
came up
think
with.
I got it. Yeah, I came up with one with the help from somebody, and I think I got a couple of more. So we can maybe reach out to them and be like, was it you? Will you come on the podcast and talk
Yeah.
about what you remember? And then they
Yeah.
also thought the LL was not actually the initials of the examiner. It was the letters assigned to them by headquarters, because apparently they did that sometimes. So you would get like letters to use to sign stuff, but they weren't your
Interesting.
initials.
Well,
So
I
they
did
said
not
like
know
that
that.
kind of, yeah, I didn't know that either. They said that kind of started with like, well, some people had them from like the handwriting analysis unit. So like that carried over from a different tradition of a different unit. So
Wow.
I think that would be confusing, because what if you have like an LL on your squad, but you're signing it LL, and the actual LL is signing it VV, and then the VV is signing it HH, and
And then think
it
if you
seems
ever had to
confusing to me.
testify on this, now you have to explain in court testimony why your initials are BP and you're signing LL. That doesn't make sense. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So I don't know.
So we're going to
That's
review the case notes that begin with the 1A envelope on page 8 of the FOIA return.
And as a reminder, these notes are from a detective from the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department, and it states that it's a review of the string search and keyword hits, and it's 18 pages long.
Yeah, we don't know this detective's name in this case, so it's hard to know his role in these notes. Like, what was he doing? What was his role? Was he a forensic examiner conducting his own searches, or was he reviewing the results of search hits that the FBI provided on the derivative evidence CDs? So let's see if these notes give us any more clues.
And these are actually the only case notes we have in the entire FOIA release related to the digital evidence. And it only contains these results related to string search and keyword results that were reviewed. That's it. Nothing related to like things we would expect, like possible CVIP hits, which is, an identification thing that was used to identify known CSAM. It didn't have anything regarding graphics that were visually identified during the exam, and nor did it have any communication that was found where it was discussing like anything related to the charges that might have been pertinent.
And what they have released here is the search string results from the devices, and the case notes of the following devices are listed in that QLA 1_3, 1_4, 1_5, a QLA 2_1, 2_2, 2_3, 2_4, 2_5, _6, _7, _8, _9, a QLA 3_1, and a QLA 4_1.
And it skips from pages 3 to 7, so there's definitely a few pages we didn't get to see there.
And then QLA 2_2 has redacted words with a reference to bed, BED, on the side that's not redacted.
And then the page for QLA 3_1 had a note that said, except as previously noted.
And then QLA 5 had no notable files.
And QLA 2_1 also said no notable files.
And that's all the notes that's all these notes tell us. Let's discuss how an exam would have worked in the FBI back then regarding these search terms and their resulting hits.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways this could go down, right? The requester certainly would provide words that they wanted searched. The card examiner could also add words that they felt were appropriate, especially in cases involving CSAM, because there are some pretty well known keywords that we used back then. There's words that we still use today. And so you would typically just use those search words every time. And since this case involved, child sexual abuse, molestation, I would think that they would have been using those common search terms and probably some more that were specific to this case. Sometimes the card examiner would filter those results down, and sometimes they didn't. I would say it would just sort of depend on the term and how much the examiner knows about the case. I would never want to filter out too much.
That's right.
But certainly if they're looking for pictures and the pictures were named a certain way and all the hits were coming up in text files, then I would feel comfortable excluding the text files. I would certainly document that I didn't like bookmark that and I would write it up in my report. But I think that's fair game to say like, hey, you wanted pictures, so I didn't give you the text files that had these matching hits.
Right. And another thing to keep in mind, these were all Macs. At the time, FTK could not process Macs. So either
Right.
EnCase or BlackBag would have been used to conduct these exams and produce reports for the investigator to review.
And I have never, have you ever seen a black bag report? I honestly don't know. Like, does it make one? What does it look like? I don't know.
I don't either. I don't.
So, the author of these notes, they could have been reviewing the search hits that were returned by the FBI card examiners if they were not the examiner.
Right. And another clue provided with the notes is what's contained on the notes, or rather what's not contained on the notes. FBI CART required that the case number, page number, and the examiner initials be included on every single page of the case notes. These notes don't have the case number or the examiner's initials either. And so based on this evidence, I don't think these notes are from a card examiner for those reasons. Card headquarters in LA did not participate in the RCFL program at that time, so detectives from other agencies would not be card examiners in either of those locations. And the case notes aren't formatted correctly the way we did that.
Is that, are we thinking through everything here? Could there be anything that we're missing to indicate like, it was CART?
I would say that if I'm pretty certain that if it was done by a card examiner, it was going to be done in that format that you and I trained on back in 2004. And
Right.
so with that being said, anything else outside of that format is like what you said, is not going to be a card examiner that's been trained to keep the notes the way that we were trained to keep them, but it's going to be someone similar, maybe a case agent, and how they were trained to do their notes, and or a detective, an investigator from one of the other agencies.
He might have been a TFO, and that's why this stuff got filed in the 1A, or maybe it was just so the CART knew, hey, I looked through this and I don't want any of this stuff. This stuff doesn't pertain.
Right. And that's the submitted evidence. That's what was provided and that's what was given.
Yep. And so the FOIA request also does contain the CART written report. It was at least 7 pages long. Unfortunately, all we really gained from that was the list of evidence again. The summary of results was redacted. The examination section was redacted. They started redacting it on page 4, and then pages 5 and 6 were completely omitted. So we didn't really get much from that we would have wanted to see.
Exactly. And at this point, all we've really learned is that 4 different people at card headquarters and or a Cleveland conducted exams on those provided devices. And in my opinion, a detective from SBSD indicated that there were no responsive search hits, so they reviewed it. And I think he was reviewing the results of CDs, the derivative evidence, that is going to contain those digital reports or files that were generated by CART.
Yeah, that's 100%. I do not think it was CART that wrote those few pages of notes that we actually got to see that basically said nothing was responsive. And we'll talk about this again later towards the end of the case. But now let's get into some of the trial transcripts, what everyone maybe has been waiting for now that we've built this foundation, because we want to know what was said in the courtroom about the digital evidence. So to get started, I had all the transcripts and I started keyword searching for things I would have expected to see. CART, FBI, examiner, computers, Mac, Apple. Not seeing that. No indicators that anybody testified about the digital evidence in the transcripts. And then, of course, I'm like, this is always a problem when stuff is like 20 years old, right? Do I have it all? Where is it? So I did some Googling, and then I found out that the judge ruled that the computer evidence should not be admitted. It was tossed. So then I had to look for different transcripts. I had to find transcripts of the court proceedings that were held without the jury in the courtroom. And so because most of the articles came out on March 24th, I went and looked a day ahead and ultimately found the details of the transcripts from March 23rd of 2005 in there. And that's where they're discussing this digital evidence and whether or not it will come into the trial.
Oh, wow.
Wow is right, Becky. And you know what? I think this is a great stopping point for this week's episode. And then next week, we can come back and talk about all of the drama that went on in the courtroom while the jury wasn't there and see what the lawyers and the judge said about getting that digital evidence admitted and why it wasn't. And so let's see what we can find out in the conclusion of The People versus Michael Jackson next week.
That's it for this episode of Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time. Support the podcast by joining the Patreon. You'll get some cool perks and exclusive members-only merchandise and a discount at the merchandise store. Or head over to the merchandise store for some swag. We'll have links in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and as always, keep parsing the truth one bite at a time.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us to get notified the next time a new episode drops. If you can do more, head on over to parsingthetruth.com and donate by clicking on the donate button. Parsing the Truth is a nonprofit organization, and we are raising money to send a new digital forensic examiner to IASIS training next year in Orlando. Thanks.